CISD. It's January 21st. We've got all trustees present. If you'll please stand for the pledges.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, we'll move into item 4, the public forum. We have one speaker signed up this evening, and Ms. Susan Seaton.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Mr. President, Mr. Cardona, and the public. My name is Susan Seaton, and I am president of the San Marcos Educators Association, Texas State Teachers Association, and we wanted to just say thank you in honor of School Board Appreciation Month. We know that a lot of times we may be on opposite sides, we may have differences of opinion, but I do know, and we know as staff, that y'all do have the best interest of our district at heart, and we want to say on behalf of all of the teachers associations in San Marcos and all of the staff that we appreciate each and everything that you do, so thank you.
Thank you for your comment. That takes us to item 5.
It's okay to clap. It's okay.
Item 5, Superintendent's report.
Mr. President and members of the board, again, I just want to echo the sentiments that Ms. Seaton and many others feel. You know, it's not very easy to get paid nothing to actually give of your time and the hours you sacrifice really for the goal of student outcomes for all children in San Marcos. So, Superintendent, I also want to thank you, and I think we have my report is a video.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Payanas. He's our music teacher at Hernandez Elementary. He's the one that put together his idea for this School Board Appreciation Month video. So, Mr. Payanas, thank you for doing this, and board. Here's a video dedicated to y'all.
Someday, when these kids have passed us by, I'll look around and remember why you were always there for me. One way, you don't give up and you always try to help us out and remind us why you were always there for me. The kids come first and you're always there. This place is warm without a care. Always loving the community.
With that, I'll just, one more thank you to you for everything you do for our school district and what you do for us in cabinet, and for me as superintendent, and asking the questions that not a lot of people ask to make sure that we take care of our kids. So I appreciate y'all very much. And before I turn it over to Ms. Reeves, I also want to take a moment to thank the teachers at the high school who have had to bear with construction, and so they started staging move-in today. They actually picked their kids up and then started moving them in to the new facility. And Mr. Barton, we went out there right before this meeting, and the first kid we asked, how do you like your space? The response was, it feels like a college campus. So I think we did what we were supposed to do. So thanks to the high school teachers, Ms. Presley, and also thank you to the teachers who bared with us while we got you your little Christmas presents over the break, those touch screens, touch panels. So I know you wanted to thank us too, Susan.
They're awesome. I use mine every day.
And with that, I'm done.
Okay. So that takes us to the item 6A, 1, academic update, starting with the course selection timeline and credit recovery update. Are these combined, Ms. Ruiz-Mills?
No, there's several.
Okay.
Did you send it to me?
Whenever you're ready.
Where is he? No, April? We'll go ahead and start with the credit and credit recovery information while they work on the course selection. So good evening, Board of Trustees. And this evening, we're going to provide a brief overview on our college credit courses, primarily AP and dual credit, and also on our credit recovery program. So currently, we have enrolled in our AP classes 523 students in 941 seats. What that means is that we have students taking multiple AP courses in grades 9 through 12. As far as our dual credit courses, we have 116 students enrolled in a dual credit course, which means that they're earning their high school credit and a credit for college. So that's a dual credit, they're earning a college transcript. Currently, we have 48 students enrolled in early college high school that are taking a dual credit course, and we have 68 students enrolled in an ACC dual credit course. Attendance is a contributing factor towards the credits earned. It is necessary for students to be in class 90% of the time. We have an attendance coordinator who organizes efforts throughout the district, working with our students, our families, and also our leaders doing home visits. She also sends out with our two truancy coordinators through the truancy grant. They send out letters when students are absent at the 3rd, 5th, and the 10th absence. They make home visits and they work in unison with our parent liaisons, offering support to the families, the students, and also to the leaders on our campus, just to ensure that students are coming to school. We also have some software that's been developed through the EdFi grant, that's through the Dell Foundation, where our leaders are able to go in and document what measures they have taken to ensure students are attending school, but also to see where the pockets around the district may be, so we can work on concerting our efforts to ensure that the students are coming to school. Ms. Presley is going to speak a little bit more about those resources.
Great. So
This program is still in its developmental stages, but at this time, we're able to we can filter kids based on their ethnicity. We can filter kids based on their grade level. We can filter kids based on the number of absences that they have. So if we just want to see who are the kids who've lost credit up to this point because of attendance, or who are the kids that only have 3 absences that we want to check in with and make sure that they're doing okay for the rest of the semester. So we can filter based on the number of absences. We can also look at their geographic areas and their grade levels. So it's still in its developmental phases and still incredibly valuable, a valuable resource for my team and I. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So in terms of credits potentially lost, so understand that this is preliminary data because we're still in a time period where we have some kids who are regaining their credits through credit recovery, which ends on January 28th. And then we have some kids who are regaining their credits that might have been lost through attendance recovery. The last date for attendance recovery is February 14th. So these are the numbers that we have from December, and these numbers might change as of February 18th, depending on how many kids earn credits in those other ways that we allow that to happen on campus or afford that to happen on campus. So we currently have 802 students who have potentially lost credit on campus from the first semester. There are 432 of those who could have lost that, or who are identified as only losing credit based on their attendance, and 270 who are potentially losing credit for both academic performance and attendance. We've offered, I'm going to let Cecily talk, Ms. Moore talk a little bit more about our credit recovery and what we're doing in terms of supporting the kids who've lost credit up to this point.
Students who earned a 60 to 69 in a course for the fall semester average are eligible to work on credit recovery unless that happened in an AP course. And students get the assignments that they need to work on from their teachers, and they can work on those at any point during our credit recovery window. We do have 4 core area teachers available in the library after school for 10 of the 15 days of our credit recovery window, and we've had approximately 30 to 35 kids show up each of those days. We've provided, with the help of child nutrition, a snack for each of the students, and some of those kids are eager to get that snack. That might be bringing them in the door, I don't know. And so they sit there with the help of a teacher and work on it. But it's not a requirement to go to the library to work on the, excuse me, to work on the assignment. They can work on it at home or throughout the day. That's up to them. They turn those back into the teacher, and then the teachers submit the grade change form to our registrar. I don't know what else to say, I think.
So the same holds true for our middle schools. The students are identified and parents are contacted, and then they are given the same amount of time for recovering their credit based on grades, which is up through the end of January, and then they start their Saturday school to make up the seat time for any credits lost in the high school courses that they're taking in middle school on Saturdays, and they can earn up to 3 hours per Saturday. And so the key to both of the recovery processes is documentation, so we can make sure that we're keeping an accurate record, because the grade will not change on the report card, it changes on the transcript. So it's very important that we know that. In middle school, the courses here that would apply towards credit recovery, of course, would be the Algebra 1, the Principles of Business, Spanish, geometry, any course taken for high school credit. We have currently 42 Goodnight students and 19 Miller students that have been identified as potentially losing the credit due to attendance in the fall, and then 30 Goodnight students and 38 Miller students potentially losing a credit due to a non-passing grade. Crossover-wise, we have 6 students at Miller that fall into both categories and 8 students at Goodnight that fall into both of those credits. Again, the key is documentation. If the attendance concerns are due to medical reasons, then we collect the doctor's notes. We actually have a process where they go to an attendance committee, the attendance committee reviews it, and then they follow the San Marcos attendance handbook guidelines, so we can start banking the needed hours so students do not lose credit. There's also flexibility if students aren't able to stay in both the high school or the middle schools. If they're unable to stay after school, really working with a student in the family to ensure that they have the opportunity to retrieve their credit. And again, here's the middle school credit recovery process where students receive help from multiple teachers from 4 to 5:15 p.m. What we'd like to stress is it's not just coming in with a packet of homework. It's tailored to each individual student's specific needs, really focusing on the standards or the TEKS that the student may still need additional support or show signs of deficiency, so really tailoring that instruction for them. So steps to college via the PSAT. We tested 2,722 students in San Marcos this past year on the PSAT. When we receive that information, Mrs. Smith works with the counselors and administrators to look at the data and really concentrate on the students on that AP potential list that have not been identified as taking an AP class, and she works with them to go through that process. Ms. Smith is going to speak a little to that, and then Ms. Moore will talk about the different PSA activities that we have coming up.
Good evening. So as you can tell from the stuff here, there are some people that meet both benchmarks in evidence-based reading and writing and math, and some that met either the evidence-based reading and writing and or just the math. But one of the things that I know always comes up is national merit. So what we know from that is that everyone received scores, and based on the evidence-based reading and the math, students can determine what their index score is. Well, the state of Texas will have an index score that is different from other states, but that can't be set until, we won't know who those students are until August, because they set one by state, and it's based on the number of graduates you produce. It's based on a lot of information before they can come up with that. So in August, those students are, schools are notified. In September, the students are notified, and it's based on an index score.
At the high school campus, we used an advisory activity last Thursday to help talk to kids about their PSAT scores. Gear Up was a big part of that activity, especially for our 9th grade group. Thank you, Gear Up. They created a Google Hangouts for teachers to tap into. If, you know, our teachers that felt comfortable talking to kids about the scores, we certainly allowed for that flexibility. But if they were looking at the score sheet and they really didn't know how to walk a student through that process, we had the Google Hangouts ready for them to go into. That presentation was also included on Ms. Presley's weekly update that goes out to families on Sunday evenings without fail. And this week we have another activity on Friday where students and parents can get support with understanding their PSAT scores. So that's kind of covered a 2-week period on our campus. We've had approximately 200 students complete the FAFSA this year with the support of Ms. Delgadillo and our College and Career Center. And we are working to get the rest of our seniors to complete the FAFSA. We've also started working with our 9th grade families, and Gear Up, again, thank you, has sponsored some financial awareness evenings throughout the fall semester. Those have been well attended. Gear Up is able to provide the families dinner when they attend. They have lots of cool door prizes. And the conversations have been about everything from how to save your money, how to prioritize how you spend your money, how to plan for college, how to get college credit while you're still in high school, financial aid, etc. So that's kind of covered the gamut as well.
So I do want to add just one more thing to our financial aid slide, and just a report on what's going on our campus. So I reported earlier, at the end of last semester, that on Tuesday and Thursday nights, our College Career Center was hosting FAFSA nights for our parents. We're at 200 right now. We typically, for the year, will reach about 250 kids. So we're excited about the progress that we're making, because we're we're ahead of where we typically are. We're working with some other programs, with some of our TRIO programs, to see about scheduling individual conversations, especially since we're in tax season. I think we'll have more parents come out, and so we're still offering support for that. We have a goal set for the number of scholarships that we'd like to bring in, and right now I think we're a little bit over 15 million, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. We're real close to 2 million, and so we're in the middle of the year, and we haven't counted our athletic scholarships. We know we've had at least 5 kids, Coach Soto, sign this year, and we have not yet applied for our local scholarships. So in addition to FAFSA, we're also working on getting our kids scholarships and finding ways to get that school paid for.
Can I ask a question? You said we've got 200 FAFSAs filled out. How many are in our senior class?
We're in the upper 400s. I'm sorry, I don't have that number, the exact number committed to memory, but the upper 400s. So at halfway through the year, I'm sorry?
Probably 500 to be safe by the time everybody gets through, including.
Correct.
Ms. Castillo?
Can we ask questions now, or do we wait until the presentation? I don't want to interrupt.
I think this presentation's wrapped up. We can ask questions now before we move into course selection.
Okay.
Go ahead, if you've got something.
Well, Ms. Cantu took care of that, how many seniors, that's what I was going to ask.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
what role is the Career Center playing with placing in this part of FAFSA and getting the word out to the students? What are they doing?
She is doing quite a bit. So we have a calendar that's scheduled for the whole year. It starts in August and moves through May. So just as of Wednesday, this past Wednesday, we pulled our senior English classes and had meetings with each of our seniors. It was a rotation throughout the entire day in the PAC. So she does that. She calls them in individually. They have lists that are broken down, and so she will take each list to make sure that either she has met with the kids herself, or some of our other ancillary programs that we partner with have made contact. But they have an ongoing list and a check she can check off and tell you exactly which kid has received which service and which presentation.
The report says here that they get, students get information about scholarship and financial aid directly from teachers as well? It says on here from teachers, or is it just from, did they provide that service too, or?
Yes, this is from Gear Up, the Steps to College Awareness. So Gear Up gives this information to all of the families and also to the teachers. They're also readily available in the Career Center and in the Gear Up office, and so there is collaboration, communication with both.
On the PSAT, when you say that 2007-22 took the PSAT, was that at what grade level are you administering the PSAT? At the sophomore
7th through
level or junior
11th.
level?
7th through 11th.
So this is 7th through 11th that
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
doing it? And this is just this past year, both in the spring and the fall of this
This is
past year?
PSAT in October.
We only do it one time for the district.
So you don't do it in the spring?
No, it's the one national date in October. We do the SAT in the spring.
Okay, but they cannot, okay, this is some time back. I have other questions, but I want to allow the other ones the opportunity.
Ms. Halsey?
Great, thank you so much. So I have a question on the number of students in advanced placement courses, that number 523 students and 941 seats. Is that representing both AP and pre-AP at the high school level, or just AP?
That was strictly the AP number.
Great, okay. And then so the credit toward graduation and the credit recovery, can you explain to me how that works for students who are involved in UIL activities? Because I know there are currently students that are not playing, that are sitting out of UIL right now. So how does that apply to, what are the requirements for them?
That's a great question. So if a student is having to go through credit recovery, right now they're academically ineligible. They need to go through the credit recovery process. Then once we have the documentation that they've passed at the next progress report, if they're passing all of their classes, that's when they regain eligibility.
So do they have to get the credit, and they have to recover the credit and be passing?
They're going to recover the credit, but they have to be passing at the 9-week, not the semester, at the 9 weeks. So if they were passing, let's say they passed the 9 weeks but still did not pass the semester, they would be eligible because of the 9-week, but they would still need to do credit recovery.
Okay, and so then are they allowed to go to practice after school, or are they being in the library during those study sessions?
So if they're making up their credit, then they'll work with their sponsor to work around those times, because we want them to earn their credit first, because that's going to take precedence. But there can be a balance between attending the practice and doing the credit recovery as well.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one more question, and that's on the PSAT numbers. So I appreciate the fact that we're using this to discern what students might be able to move into pre-AP and AP classes, and I think that's great to be pushing kids. But it concerns me that just looking at the benchmarks, it seems, our numbers for students that are going to be qualifying for college eligibility really is hovering around 20%. And so how are we using these numbers to reach students who need strategic academic interventions in order to increase their eligibility?
Well, the PSAT, SAT, the whole suite of assessments was realigned a few years ago so that it was more like what kids are learning in class. And so that gives us a pretty good indicator of how well they are learning it. So by using these scores and having the announcement that they did through advisory, so teachers understand the interpretation, they can then figure out how they need to adjust their lessons. And we still link to Khan Academy so students could get individual practice where they're weak.
Thank you.
As a follow-up, I'd like to ask, how many SAT tutorials do we have planned for the spring?
Oh, we did a group in the fall, and we'll do more in the spring based on, I'm not exactly sure what the high school has planned, but that's something they will plan, and we'll try to always target those kids at the top tier for one thing, but they will also target the kids that could, everyone can improve from it. But the Khan Academy piece is the real key part of that, because it's very specialized and it's specific to their score and what they missed. So Khan Academy is really one of the best ways to target that.
Because I understand there's a March that you can give during the week. There's a March SAT that's coming.
Oh yes, we have an SAT school day planned. That's March 25th, and our makeup day is April 14th. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Okay. That's why I was wondering if it was scheduled for January, February to get ready for March.
She said they do not have dates set yet.
Ms. Castillo?
On the recovery, you indicate on here that we have 802 at the high school.
Yes, ma'am.
And the numbers are not here, and I know it might be hard. Those numbers, what is the largest portion of that? Are they juniors, seniors? What is the largest portion of that 802?
For our attendance, I can tell you that it's our freshmen. We are,
The 432 is primarily freshmen?
No.
No? I'm, you know,
802 or the
you don't make
402?
reference to 802 may potentially lose credit in the fall semester. I'm making reference to that. So out of those 802, what is the largest number? Is it freshmen, sophomore, juniors, or seniors?
yes, ma'am, our freshmen.
I have a couple follow-ups on
And-
this point after. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Castillo.
So out of the 32, and then the 270 that are missing both grades and attendance. Is that what you're talking about over here about working, the activities that are taking place towards that?
Yes, ma'am. So we're in a place where there are two efforts going on at the same time. So there are some preventative efforts, right? And that's why we've reinstated our attendance position. We are building this program where we can have more robust data and really zero in on we have to define what the problem is, right? Because our attendance is, it's in a tough place, so we are gathering all the data that we can so we can define the problem and address the problem. So there's the preventative efforts that are going on, and then we also have the reactionary efforts that are going on, which is the recovery and we want to get ourselves out of this place where we're constantly having to recover and, attendance recovery and credit recovery. We have to move our kids forward, and that's going to really take a culture shift. For our attendance to be where it needs to be, we can't have more than 130 kids absent on a day, and there are some days where we have over 200 kids absent in a day.
So this one says that you have maybe 32 to 35 per day after-school participants out of this total number?
Yes, ma'am. Do you want to speak on credit recovery?
The 30 to 35 per day after school in the library are just the students that choose to go there to work on their assignments. The students can work on their assignments outside of that, and so they've gotten them from their teachers beginning January 7th, their first day back from the semester. And they're working on those. I already have some students that have completed it, and those teachers have turned in those grade change forms to me.
So we don't have any kind of mandatory requirement for students that need to make up work so they don't lose credit for them to, we're talking about after school, and students are tired after school. I would be, I remember my school
We're all
days.
tired if there was
Yeah,
school.
and wanting them, needing to keep them after school to recover credit, I don't have the solution either. I'm just thinking that during the day, what is there during the day that they can do other than maybe going to their teacher, which on their own most of the time. I went through one of them with one of them, and I
Before school and right after school is really considered part of the day, and so is lunch.
And
They have other times during the day.
there are times during
I don't know,
lunch.
did you see when you walked in right before this board meeting, all those kids in the cafeteria? Those are the kids making up their attendance credits and their credits. And there was probably about 100 kids in there. So, they're coming. They were there, but,
And the ones in the library can get credit for attendance.
you can't physically make a kid go and sit if they don't. That's why they have attendance issues, because they're not following the law to begin with.
These 270 that are both relative to grades and attendance, the higher number of that is attendance, or is it grades?
On
The 270.
Oh, those are there is no higher or lower. That's just the 270 students that we've identified who are losing credit because of both academic and attendance. So maybe my attendance is not where it needs to be, and I've missed so much class that I didn't get the content, and so I also
Grade
failed the
as
class,
well.
right? Yes. But there are some kids, so when you look at the 432, those are students who, I have a 70 in the class, and I wasn't there, so my 70 was held, so now I just need to make up the seat time. And going back to your previous question, one of the things we have to be careful with is understanding the law doesn't allow us to make up credit, attendance credit. We can't gain seat time during the instructional period, right? So that throws a wrench into, we have to do it either on a Saturday or in a Saturday school or after school.
Mr. Superintendent, and I'm finished with my questions. I'm just going to address to you. This has been always a concern to me, and I'm not saying that nobody's doing their job. I'm just saying that a lot of students don't go to school because they get behind. And
Well, they don't go to school because they violate the law.
well,
We
they
have a
violate the
state
law, but a lot
policy
of
on
times they
law
don't go
on
to school either
attendance.
because they're not up to doing the coursework. They're lost. So they miss school. So that's where I'm getting at. What is it that can be
Well, I mean, I would say this, I mean, we put a lot of stuff in place, and there is a culture, you know, and I'll use the Laredo United football game as the example. You know, there was a lot of concern about attendance, and there was about 300 kids that participated in that Laredo United trip, athletes, cheerleaders. They had like 97% attendance that Friday. They got like about 4 hours of sleep. The ones who missed school were the ones that didn't go to the trip. So we have this culture here that is embedded. I've heard some of y'all talk about this for years and years, that when it rains, they just don't send them. And so that's what our attendance clerks and our new attendance person, our parent liaisons are really trying to get out to, like, no, you need to be in school. You know, there's the thing with Travis. When it rains, there is a trauma around rain in that area that we know it's real, because we've driven that when it's raining, and they are not going to put their kids on the road. And so we have to address that also.
And I understand that, having worked with TRIO programs in the past and having worked with many years back, and I'm not saying that things have not changed, yes, they have. But I know that one of the things that in meeting with students that I work with and whatever, and talking about not attending school, most of it was in the fact that they were so far behind. I mean, not so far behind, but they just could not understand, comprehend, and basically those were your science, your math, and your, you know, your algebra classes that students were having a hard time keeping up. So sometimes a lot of them would just say, well, why even go to school anymore? I'll never catch up.
And
I'm just trying to get into the academic portion of it as to what is being addressed and what can we more do to recover some of these students, because I can see students dropping out, and that hurts our attendance also, in us getting our money, you know, for the school, because kids are not attending
Yeah,
school.
so just let me reframe, like, just so you can refresh your memory about what we have done. So, I mean, we are 1-to-1 at the high school, so, and we did a survey, and about 70% of our families have access to internet, right? So they have devices now that don't tie them necessarily to the building, so they can get work in, right, using the devices we've provided. And I mean, we've put a lot more structure around, like the Saturday, you had 4 teachers there from the different core content areas. So we've put systems in place. We've done a better job of having parent meetings, the platicas we're doing.
Right.
And yes, you're right, there are a portion of kids that get behind, but it's not because they're getting behind. We've put systems of support. Really, it's trying to shift the culture of school's important. And what families don't understand in the community is, yeah, there's more jobs in the world, and there are more jobs, but the ones that are being left behind are just the high school graduate. It's no longer the case that, like, if you look at all the research, the latest one just came out in 2018, will clearly say that the people left behind are just the high school graduate. That's why we're doing early college. That's why we did Gear Up. That's why we applied for those. That's why we're doing dual language, because that's the population of kid that's dropping out at the high school, your dual language kid, the kid who doesn't know. Those are the things we put in place, but we need, parents will listen to board members, because they sure do go to y'all when they have an issue. They come to y'all, and we need y'all to let them know, like, these are all the supports we have. But there is a stigma with some kids, and it's cultural. And I don't know how you break the culture. You saw one of the kids, you know, that they pointed out from Hernandez. I talked to his dad for about 2 hours on that fundraiser day. He's an 8th grade dropout. And I was trying to stress to him the importance of working through the school. But for him, that's his reality. He's in high school, and he didn't care about school, and he's doing fine. I don't know how I break that. And I look like him. I think I can say a lot of things to some of these parents that not a lot of people can say, but it really is a cultural shift. And I don't know, I mean, if you have any advice, we've put all the systems in place.
We also have Button Academy, and that's designed for kids who might fall behind in their credits. And I met with our attendance office personnel today, and our conversation was about building a space, a Button Academy, just for kids who want to get caught up on their attendance. So maybe I have been behind and I'm lagging a little bit, and I decide, okay, I'm snap out of it, I'm ready to go back to school, but I don't want to go back to school because I've fallen so far behind, I'm just discouraged. And so now our next steps then is to build a space for that group of kids. So we are, Phoenix is another option. Mr. Cardona has given us permission to entertain specialized school days for specific kids who need that. Some kids may need a morning off because for whatever reason, and then just to go to school in the afternoons. And so I agree with you 100%. Our numbers are concerning. Our team is giving a good faith effort, and we are daily having those conversations and brainstorming. Gear Up has started a mentor program for our ninth graders, and that group of kids who will be assigned mentors were chosen based on their attendance. It's the kid who's in the middle. And so we are coming at the situation at all angles, and definitely we still need to tighten up some of our systems that we have in place right now. And it's going to take a little bit of time. The good news is we saw a small jump in our attendance in the fall semester. So we know that some of the things that we are doing are working, and we still have much more work to do.
Well, thank you, I appreciate all your efforts.
Mr. Arredondo?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you, Ms. Presley and staff, for putting this presentation together. I know we asked for it at our agenda preparation meeting early last week, and to gather this data as you did, it's appreciated. Again, thank you, Ms. Cantu, as well, for requesting this information. The biggest takeaway that I have is the last enrollment figure I saw for Miller Middle School was about 855 students at that campus. And so we could say that a middle school worth of students at our high school have potentially lost credit due to attendance and absences. And so that's very concerning to me. Mr. Cardona mentioned the programs and the systems that are in place to address that, but clearly there's more to be done, and I wish I knew what that was. I wish, Mrs. Costia or myself could say, do this, Mr. Superintendent, and we solve that problem. And clearly I don't have the answers to that. But with all of that being said, obviously this needs to be an ongoing conversation. I know, Ms. Presley will remember when we had a freshman campus to address the needs of the freshman population that transitioned from middle school to high school. Obviously, our campus is laid out differently than it used to be, so I don't know what that looks like, but as an individual trustee, I'm willing to entertain any and all options when it comes to addressing our freshman cohort. We just opened up our STEAM facility here, and if those students are at risk of losing credit, they can't take those CTE classes because we're just going to want them to get their core curriculum out of the way. So we have $1 million facility that potentially some of these students couldn't use because of those attendance challenges, and that is very concerning to me. So whatever that looks like in February, March, April, as we close out this academic year, I'm ready and willing and able to entertain anything when it comes to addressing our attendance concerns and challenges here at the high school.
Ms. Cantu?
Dr. Reese-Mills, my question's for you. How does this compare to last year? Were we at this point looked at it?
I didn't look at last year's data. I can get that for you and present it in February when we go through the taper report. We don't, just very briefly though, we don't keep track of the students that enroll in credit recovery. We document the students who end up retrieving their credit. So that might be a little bit of a challenging feat, but we can see what we can pull up.
Thank you.
Ms. Hanson?
At the February board meeting, will we have the update of this? How this ended up?
At the February board meeting, we should be able to give you the update, and we can tie that to the end of our taper report, because the taper report will be done in February, and that's the second to the longest presentation I do throughout the year. So yes.
Thank you.
Because they only have till February 14th to recover their credits, right?
May I make a pitch for our counselors? Because our last day to make up credit recovery for attendance, or attendance recovery, is February 18th. I believe the board meeting is that following Monday, which would put them in, they'd have to work over the weekend to get those numbers to you. just a pitch for my counselors, could we maybe, I don't know if Mr. Cardona could send that, or Dr. Reese Mills send that in, or if we wait until the March board meeting. I don't know what that could look like, but
It's an informational request, so it can come outside of our board calendar. Whenever the information's ready, within reason, it can be emailed to all of us. I have a couple more information requests on this topic. First of all, I'm inferring from the presentation that students that made below a 60 are not eligible to recover credit. Is that correct, Ms. Ruiz Mills?
Yes.
But I don't know, just looking at this, how many of the 802 or the 270 are outside of that 60 to 70 band, you know, those for whom credit cannot be recovered.
go ahead.
That 802 number is the students that earned the 60 to 69. So for students that earned less than a 60, summer school would be their option to regain that credit.
So there could be more than the 802?
Yes, that are outside of the 60 range.
Yikes. Do you have an idea how many that is?
No, but we can send that information.
Okay, I'd like that. And additionally, as to the attendance, I'm sure that this is how it works, but are the families notified when they're in, you know, the red zone, they're within 2 absences of losing credit, and how does that notification work?
So they get a letter at the 3rd absence, the 5th absence, and the 10th absence. And then we also have teachers that you have contacting the parents as well, letting them know. And so we have that process going along with an attendance committee, and they follow everything that's in the San Marcos Attendance Handbook. Did I leave something out?
I also, we've dedicated one administrator to just work on attendance. So every Tuesday we have an administrator and one of our assistants from admin assistants from the attendance office make home visits, and so they block off their day to go to home visits. And one of the things they asked for today was to extend that time so that they can make home visits in the afternoon, in the evenings, as well as many of our parents are at work during the day.
Just to follow up to that, if the student is in a UIL activity, is the coach or the instructor also making those home visits?
Coach Soto, you want to?
If a student is involved in a UIL activity and they are also needing to recover credit, is a coach or a extracurricular instructor also helping to reach out to the families, to the parents, to talk about that student's status?
Yes, we check them every summer for their credits and see where they're at. So when they come back during the year, we help them with that and help influence them to get the credits that they need during the summer, during summer school, and then as they're working through the year, depending on what they're doing at semesters, we'll look at their semester grades and see where they're at. And if they're falling behind, you know, we try to make sure that they make it up in that next semester so they don't lose that credit. We do as much as we can to keep them on path. And working with the counselors also, counselors let us know where they are with their credits, but if they don't have enough credits, they can't play the next year.
Because that seems to me like, if we're talking about culture and cultural shifts, et cetera, if we have students that are already engaged in extracurricular activities and in sports and in music programs, like those kids are kids we shouldn't be losing, right? Like they want to be in those activities. And so if we aren't doing everything under the sun to get those kids academically recovered, then I think we're really failing.
Ms. Castillo, you had another question?
I guess if it was up to me, we could go on and on about this, but it's not. I will say this, on attendance, once upon a time, you used to have an attendance officer at the high school, many years. Do we have an attendance officer at the, a designated attendance officer?
We didn't when I got here, and then we put one in this year.
And I know about the, I guess
repurposed
being the social worker that I am, you know, I'm used to going out to making visits, you know, not looking for people. But what are you finding as far as why students are not coming to school? What is a primary reason that you're finding? The parents don't care, the kids just don't want to go decide on their own, they don't want to go to school. What are we finding? What are some of the reasons we're finding that they're not wanting to go to school? I mean, these kids are more verbal anyway.
I would say we're finding everything. I talked to my counselors today. Actually, they came to me about and just shared some of the stories that they've encountered as we go through this recovery process. We had one student who was stuck out of state and could not get back to San Marcos, and she lost a week of instruction. I have a young man who is having some problems at home and moved in with a friend, and can get on the bus to come to school, can't get a bus to go home because that friend that he's living with, their parents aren't his legal guardian. So so sometimes he won't come to school because he doesn't know how he's going to get home if it's raining or the weather is not so good.
So are we finding more social issue problems, related problems, or are we finding just not wanting to go to school, period?
We are finding more social problems.
So our social emotional counselors are working with them?
Yes, ma'am, and we have one. I did work with, had a meeting, today was just a great meeting for this board meeting. Today, a great day of meetings for this board meeting. I met with Dr. Blaylock from Texas State University today, who is eager and willing and ready to partner with us in bringing in interns. I haven't even shared this with April yet, to bring in interns and give our kids some support. She's also willing to, look at some other partnerships that I'm not ready to disclose because it hadn't yet been come to fruition, but it is a hot topic, and I know Mr. Cardona has talked about some other things on his side that he's trying to do to help us get more support for our kids.
Are we still getting interns from the university, South?
They restructured their program. Texas State. Yeah.
I know they have a new director, Dr. Osbrooks.
Yes.
She's.
But they killed their program, so,
Okay.
I mean, I think, at least individually, I appreciate any help we can get from Texas State. Any partnership would be great, but I mean, this is a problem that we're going to have to solve ourselves. The faculty here, they're the ones that are going to hear frontline stories. Why weren't you at school yesterday? Oh, and if it's a transportation issue, then they can refer that to people that might be able to solve the transportation issue. But there's so many that we're only hearing about afterwards, because they're not engaged. They're not,
More than one.
And also we haven't as a group. I mean, not this group, not the present admin, but this is a school where they just sign. I mean, it was in the paper, they were just signing attendance or credit recoveries without them being earned. So that sort of culture filters down to the kids, and they can't just turn on a dime now that we have a group that is focused on it. So
part of that is their fight against the systems we put in place.
Right.
They're still fighting. There's a culture of, they'll take care of me. But we're not even talking about elementary. I mean, if we need social workers, we need them down at the elementary schools too, because
we need them everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue.
All right. Anything else? I think we pretty much went through that. We're now in course selection. Yeah.
So I think this is a perfect segue into course selection. All the data that we looked at that you guys saw, the credit recovery, the attendance, looking at what Gear Up is doing, all of that information is taken whenever the counselors are meeting with students. So all of that plus more is taken into account, because we know that our ultimate goal is to graduate students, right, with a plan that they know that they can put in place immediately once they leave us. And so course selection drives all of that. And so taking into account the number of days that they've missed, how are we going to recover those courses, thinking about what are their interests as far as what they want to do once they leave. All of that is taken into place once we start course registration. And so we look at all of that data as a school counselor, and one of the things school counselors are really good at is puzzles, right? And so we can take all of those pieces and put it together and make it a reality. But we do have to have those incremental strategies in place to help support students, because it's hard for them to see that big picture at the end of graduation. And so all of those supports that are mentioned, those are the things that counselors share with students in order to help them see that end goal as being a reality. So we created a course window, a course registration window for, first we'll start with the high school for the high school. And so it looks at, we have the date set as April the 3rd. And so that is our absolute deadline to have all of the course registration complete. So all of the data is entered into eSchool, and the principals are able to start looking at that to start creating budgets and planning for staffing and all of their planning for the next year. And so we have our course selection night tomorrow. So students are able to come and visit the high school. They're able to get a tour. They're able to see what courses are offered, and then also they can see the STEAM lab as well. And so then after that point, high school counselors will be meeting individually with students. They're going over to the middle schools to meet with them as well, because it's one of those things where it takes the high school counselor to sell it to the middle school students, because that's when they really believe it, because they start to realize that they're going to be high school students. Then next we have the middle schools, and so their window is a little bit shorter because they have less students, but then also I want them to have an opportunity to get their data in and then have time to clean it up as well. And so they also have a few more informational nights for parents as 5th graders transition to 6th grade, because we know that's an important time for students, and it's a challenge sometimes for our parents to switch over from elementary to secondary. And so we want to make sure that they're as informed as they can possibly be. And so you can see our window, and they're not identical, but they're similar from Goodnight to Miller. It's just they have an option to choose when they want to have their parent nights or their tours for their campuses. But we wanted to ensure that every 5th grader had an opportunity to see their new middle school, and for every 6th and 7th grader to have an opportunity to meet with their counselor to have a discussion about their courses for next year. And then also our counselors at the middle schools will meet individually with every single 8th grader to create that 4-year plan. Again, to have that conversation about where do you see yourself once you graduate from high school. And we know those will change, but at least we can start those conversations so that we can start to create that dream for the kids. And so, like I said, Miller is pretty similar, but the dates are slightly different just as far as when they have parent meetings and whatnot. Then we have our Chs Recruitment Timeline. Again, another one of those opportunities for our students to engage and to have an option as far as what they want to do once they leave high school. And so we put in a lot of work as far as ECHS and being very intentional about how we get the information out to parents, but also how our students are informed about the program as well. And so we had a information session. There was over 100 parents that were there to learn about the program. We also offered lunch and learns at each one of the middle schools. And I will tell you, it was interesting. At one of them, we had an elementary parent that was there that was wanting to learn about it for her student. And so 3 or 4 years down the line, but that was wonderful. She had an opportunity to come and we can inform her about what is to come, you know, which is really important for our parents to learn that we have these opportunities for their students once they get to high school. And so we had 2 lunch and learn opportunities, and then the window opened on December the 2nd. The window is now closed for applications, and so we'll start the review process of looking at all of those and making those decisions as far as students to be accepted into ECHS. Then the February 4th, the letter will be mailed out to parents, and then we'll have that parent meeting for all of the parents that will start the next cohort for ECHS. And so our goal is to ensure that our parents are informed and they understand what this is going to look like, and they understand the commitment to ECHS. So our window may feel like it's a little early, but there's so much work that goes into getting them ready to start college courses in the fall semester.
Ms. Castillo?
I just have one question. What was the participation at Goodnight at Miller School when you had these lunch and learn? What was the participation like? I mean, I don't want exact numbers, more or less.
Okay. So at Goodnight, there were about, there were maybe 4 or 5 parents, and then at Miller, about the same. Okay, I think that's fair. Yes.
What were the evening sessions like?
It was just over 100 parents.
At each one, or?
No, we only have 1 parent night.
Oh, on one, okay.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Ms. Mustafa, I know you probably don't have this information in front of you this evening, but at a later date, I will be asking to see the frequency in which, I know 8th graders meet with their counselor and they create a 4-year plan. in a future meeting, memorandum, whatever that looks like, I would like to see the frequency in which current San Marcos High School students meet with counselors to follow up on that 4-year plan. I say that I'm going to take these courses over the 4 years. You see me in 8th grade. Anecdotally, I know I met with my counselor maybe a handful of times. I graduated in 2010, mind you, but again, I'm concerned and focused on how many times we're meeting with these students throughout their course of their high school career. You know, I say that I'm going to be in, veterinary school, or I'm going to go through this CTE sequence. Our counselors meeting with those students, making sure that they're taking the right classes, making sure that they're following that sequency, and that they're following what they essentially committed to in 8th grade, or, are we losing them somewhere, and if we are, what are we doing to, provide interventions?
That's a good question. And one of the things, it'll look so different for every student, because there's always that kid that loves to go see their school counselor, and they would go in every single day to talk about, can you show me my plan? Let's talk about my plan. Miss, where am I at today? And then there's that student that you'll see that one time at when you do your course registration or you do your 4-year planning. So, but yes, we can definitely get you an idea of how many times they're meeting with their kids. But as far as course registration, it is once a year. Like, that is a guarantee. They're going to meet with their counselor. They're going to have that conversation about what courses they plan to take and their plan. Then we also have our College and Career Center, and so we know that they are meeting with the kids individually as well to have those conversations. So kind of working side by side to ensure that our kids have a plan for once they leave us.
Thank you so much for that comment, and I agree. I think it looks different for every student, and I think, if Mrs. Costilla remembers, we've heard again stories of where some ISDs shut down their central administration facility and bring those staff into the high school to meet one-on-one with students to talk about courses and goals and career aspirations and things like that, just because of staffing constraints. And obviously when we talk about attendance and credit and things like that, again, I'm ready and willing to entertain any of those ideas or proposals to make sure that we're talking with our students, to make sure that they are following that sequence of courses and that they are on track to graduate on time, because obviously more has to be done with that issue.
Yeah, and that's a powerful idea, because it's one of those things where kids can actually see it. Like, you did it. You went here, you know what this looks like, and now this is where you are. And so it's always a good opportunity, not only just for our community to be in our schools, but for kids to see that it is real. Because sometimes it's hard for adults on the campus because the kids think, well, you just have to tell me this, miss. But it's not. Like, this is a reality. So having folks like you come in to be able to say, no, you can actually do this, and I was here, can make a big difference, and it can be very powerful.
Ms. Halsey?
So my question is a follow-up to Mr. Ardondo's, and my understanding was that 9th graders were making those 4-year plans during the spring semester of their 9th grade year, and I don't see that reflected in here.
8th grade. So whenever
Eighth grade. Supposed to
before
be in
they
eighth
leave
grade.
the 8th grade, they have to, and it's written into law, that they have to identify which endorsement they plan to, that they would like to select, not that they have to live by that endorsement.
Right.
But they definitely have to make that selection as far as their endorsement. And so our 8th grade counselor, our middle school counselors will meet with the kids to identify that endorsement and make that 4-year plan. And then the counselors here just continue by reviewing the 4-year plan, looking at the courses, having that conversation about where do you see yourself going.
So maybe we have a gap in understanding in terms of what I consider to be a 4-year plan. Because I consider a 4-year plan to be an actual list of all of the courses any student is going to take in 9th grade, all of the courses they're going to take in 10th grade, all the courses 11th grade and 12th grade, so that both the parent and the student know, like, you're going to do Algebra 1 this year and then Algebra 2, etc. Is that not what you understand? Is there something different? Because I know, yes, in 8th grade there was the selection of the certifications, but that is not a mapping out of all of the courses that one's going to take in order to be college eligible.
Sadie didn't bring one home?
So we use eSchool, and so within eSchool it basically looks like a graph, and so it has all 4 years, and so the counselor is able to have that conversation with the student, and they select those courses, and so it's built through eSchool, and so it can be printed out as a nice form that the student can then take with them, but it's created through eSchool.
So maybe we need to communicate that to parents on a more regular basis than we're currently doing. Maybe at least once or twice a year, maybe at the beginning of each semester.
Ms. Castillo?
Well, this is an interesting conversation because this is following up, and I know thanks to Ms. Cantu here, My granddaughter graduated in 2013, but in her 8th grade, we sat down and we did her 4-year college. My problem and my concern was that once she started high school, she was never called. It wasn't until the spring of her junior year that I had to call her counselor and say, you really need to meet with my granddaughter. I mean, we were following everything that was outlined according to what we had identified. So I'm following up with you because that was a real concern to me. And I don't know whether it's happening again and to how many other parents it's happening, that they're not meeting, that the counselor is not meeting specifically with their students, they're assigned, whether at the hopefully at the first, every year, rather than waiting for the parent. And parents have said, we call the counselor and we don't ever get a return call. Now, I appreciate everything that's being done, and I think that the change is ongoing and more things are happening. But I just want assurance that every counselor is going to be following up with those students. Yes, that 4-year plan has been developed at the 8th grade level, but it needs to be followed up with that counselor.
No, absolutely, I agree. And with my time being here, I feel confident enough to be able to say that I know our counselors are, I trust that my counselors are meeting with their students and they're having these conversations. But I agree, and I agree with Ms. Halsey as well, of ensuring that our parents are aware and what that looks like. Because I think it's one thing to inform parents,
Yeah.
but there's another step. We can take another step of educating them on what this process looks like. So I agree, and if there's gaps there, then we definitely need to close them. And if one person is saying it, it shouldn't happen, right? And so we need to do something to ensure that it's not happening.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that wraps it up. Thank you. Let's take a brief 5-minute break before we go into the construction updates. So it's 7:07, we'll come back at 7:12. That takes us back to item 6B, construction update.
Good evening, Board President McLaughlin, Trustees, and Superintendent Cardona. On page 10 of your board book is the construction update. A little bit different format, and because the projects are different, if you had any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to stop me. Hope you've had an opportunity to look over our budget. We were asked previously, how can board members know what money they have to spend as we're in the home stretch of our projects? This format allows you to answer that question.
I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're used to this sheet, and again, we're just tracking our days and when we start. Going through our projects, Rodriguez, we're down to 23 punch items. 19 of them, I'm told, are just the ceiling tiles where we want them to do a little bit differently around the sprinkler heads. It's really in its final days. We have a little bit of more work left with the 5 campus renovation, and there you see by campus the punch change items. We did open the high school building. Our teachers, Mr. Cardona mentioned, were outstanding. They came in this weekend. Their classrooms were beautiful this morning. They met their students in their classroom in the main building and walked them over period by period. Just a lot of excitement, and as frustrating as a process can be of building, it's really cool to see kids get excited about their classes and the new places for learning. This is the main hallway. And Mr. Cardona and I talked today about maybe getting a tour or holding agenda prep up there at some point, just so we get to experience it and feel the building. And then looking down on the courtyard is very impressive. It's fun watching kids enjoy the turf today during every passing period. Our high school edition, there are labs for our major classes, robotics, and then there's a science lab, a more traditional one. This was at the tail end of last week. It's arranged for classrooms now, a little better. A law enforcement classroom, and then our automotive body shop, that's a paint booth. It's quite a piece of technology. And then our courtyards, we're still moving our construction out of the building, but they're working in the evening, so they come in, they're in there right now. And they're coming in and working on items that need to be addressed each evening after kids are gone. This is the list of where we are with our high school project. You can see the items completed and then the work that's still scheduled for the next 30 days. Moving on to Miller. You can see that we started the earliest, and we're really in the phasing and getting ready for construction phase still. A lot of work right now with the fire riser room and making sure that we're good with our fire alarms and our sprinkler system. So we've staged the outside area. The construction building is up, the fencing is up, and our Miller families are well aware of the tax that's put on our drop-off and pickup lines in the morning. We do have a new front door to Miller. And so it's a little bit of a walk right through the side of the building instead of the very front. And at agenda prep, the trustees had asked if we would set aside a portion of time for Weber to speak or answer questions. And so I went ahead and just built that into the presentation and asked our friends at Weber to come to the mic and answer any questions you might have.
Before we get to that, I have Mr. Barton, are we still holding money on Rodriguez?
On
Rodriguez?
I believe we still have our final payment to make.
Okay. Do we not phase that out? Like, is it proportional to the amount of work the contractor has left? Or if it's a few ceiling tiles, are we still holding a few $1 million?
It's a percentage, and we don't pay the final check till we close it out with you.
Okay. And that, you think that'll come to us at our next meeting?
I'm shooting for March, actually. I want to bring you in February. We're hoping for the re-roof project and the transportation facility. Those are the first two, try and take them in order. And then Rodriguez will be up in the second round of that.
Okay, well, if it's complete, I would prefer to see it sooner because we need to be good partners just as we expect of them. If they've finished their work, I'd like to get them paid.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now we can proceed to the Weber.
Good evening.
Mr. Arredondo, I think you had some questions?
Yeah, so I appreciate Mr. Barton including, I think, the one pager that is included in our board book about the conversations with Weber and our middle school project. And again, I thank you for being here this evening, sir. I guess the biggest concerns I have is I know there were challenges with subcontractors and work being done, kind of what y'all were overseeing. And my question is, what can we anticipate or what remedies are going to be put in place this time so we don't see the challenges that we saw at the high school continue on?
Well, the number one thing is obviously subcontractor selection. The biggest issue that we have in this industry is always getting the right subs to do the right work. Unfortunately, on this job, we did make a couple of mistakes and hired the wrong subs in hopes that we were, at the end of the day, we're always trying to save a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. It never works out that way. This has been a great example for not just on the project management side, but also everybody up above us in our procurement teams and everyone else to explain why we have to pre-qualify, why we have to make sure we have the subs that have the manpower, that have the material, that have the want to come out here and work for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Were any of those subs local contractors, or is there like an effort to do that in the future, or was that where like the challenges came from?
There's always an effort to get local subcontractors. I think any place that I've ever built anything, if you can have that local influence, if you can have the local guys, it helps. As far as our industry as a whole, there are a handful of contractors here in San Marcos. Matter of fact, we're trying hard to work with San Marcos Air for our HVAC on the project. We're in the kind of in the home stretch of working out those deals. But San Marcos is in a very weird spot geographically for the market, in that you have people working in San Antonio, you have people working in Austin, and a lot of the subs sometimes they'll be like, well, I can stay in San Marcos, I can stay in San Antonio, or I can send my guys an hour down the road. I'll keep my guys here. And it's also a problem, as a perfect example is when we were trying to supplement our sub. A lot of guys that I've worked with for the past 15, 20 years were like, I would love to go to San Marcos, I'd love to go help you out, but it's just, I'm so busy right here, I can't get up to there. So our effort has been focusing on, again, finding the people that have the manpower, to come out here and do a good job.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Takes us to items 6, C and D. I think you'll handle together.
Mr. McLaughlin, I didn't know that we were complete with the construction update. I had one thing separate from.
Oh, apart from the Weber. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Barton, I know in conversations with Mr. Cardona as we toured some of the new renovations and facilities, one of the pieces of information I've asked from your department is utility costs year to year with the city of San Marcos, utility rate increases, so on and so forth. I don't know if it's something that we can reach out to our friends at TASA, TASB, or MOSBOT, but looking at services of where the ISD can focus on energy management in a more holistic way, whether that's transitioning to LED lights, things at our football facilities, our indoor athletic complex. Obviously, we have some very big facilities that we light and air condition and heat, and obviously, those costs are not decreasing on the city side. The city consistently increases water rates, utility rates, garbage rates, so on and so forth. So anything that we can do as we go into the budget formation process to decrease those costs year to year, knowing that those rates are going to increase year to year, I'm interested as an individual trustee in exploring that. And I don't know if that comes to us as an RFP or an update from the superintendent or your office. But again, in the months to come, I'd like to see more information on what we can do to decrease our utility consumption and costs in budget
For that,
season.
I think you'll get an update from my office, if not this week, at the very beginning of next week, with some feedback on that. But also, I would say that LED lighting is something we have a hope to install in a lot of our facilities. It might be on the tail end of this bond project because we do have energy management as one of our focus, but we're making sure we take care of the projects. We have kids in the building right now. So we're going to do that first. But yes, sir, we're on that. And we'd like a little bit more information, but I think I have some things to offer too also.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Proceed.
Hey, we just had it on the tail end of our projects. We had Days of Olive. We're going to bring you the contract this evening. And then in the next month or so, we should be getting bids on Goodnight, and that's the final project for this bond. So that's been a great year and a half for our school district.
So 4.3 is the estimated savings?
That's the funds available to the board. And on the tail end of the projects, they're costing a little bit more. Construction is in high demand right now, so we're in a good position to get what our voters asked for in that bond with the savings that we've had.
Yeah, you can proceed. I think it's from you to the investment report and financial update, items 6, C, and D.
Page 26 on your board book is the quarterly investment. That follows the normal template you are used to. Taking out each fund from the beginning of the quarter till the end. Are there any questions on that?
I don't believe so.
And for the financial update, on page 33 of your board book, comparing year-to-date last year to this year, we are up in revenue just a bit, and down in expenditures just a bit. Did the trustees have any questions on our financial update?
Okay, I don't see any.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, item 6E is a discussion regarding local bank depositories, and this, we added at agenda prep. This has been an ongoing conversation over the last couple months. It was initiated by Mr. Arredondo to look at whether using a local bank would be an option rather than using Texpool. And before we chase off and have staff tasked with things that would require maybe some significant time, I wanted to put a discussion item to hear feedback from other trustees, not necessarily to vote to do it tonight, but whether there's sufficient support to walk down that road. So Mr. Arredondo, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So like President McLaughlin said, this was an item that I brought forward for discussion, I think, at agenda preparation in November and December, alluding to this was something that I was interested in. Obviously, we have a significant amount of San Marcos CISD tax dollars from taxpayers in San Marcos CISD in Texpool accounts outside of our community that aren't being invested here locally, that aren't circulating here locally, but they were retrieved here locally through tax dollars. And so as an individual trustee, I'm interested in putting at least a portion of those Texpool dollars back into local financial institutions. I think philosophically we all know how banks work. The more money that they have in them, the more money they can lend out, and that circulates in the community. And so as an individual trustee, again, I bring this forward to my colleagues tonight to hopefully entertain that conversation and that idea that tax dollars retrieved here in this community, at least in some part, stay here. I understand that interest rates, interest-bearing accounts might be less here in San Marcos and in local banks. I acknowledge that and I respect that perspective, but again, I just fundamentally believe that a portion of tax dollars generated here in our community should be here. And hopefully we can incentivize and encourage these local financial institutions to then invest here as well and provide financing for families to buy homes or a number of services if those banks had those resources available to them. And so that's why it's on tonight's agenda for discussion.
Okay. Are there any, Ms. Villapan?
I would not like, Mr. Barton. Last week, or whenever we had agenda prep, I think, and this discussion came up, you mentioned how Texpool is a little bit different and how what they do to work with you. I think we need to compare those kind of things with local banks and what we could and could not do and how I understand about local money, wanting to help the local economy here and everything, but we need to find out exactly the kind of things that tech school does do for us that maybe the local could not do. And you don't have to answer that now. Whenever we get to discuss it more in depth, and I just think we need a comparison. What are we going to lose from tech school? What or are we going to lose anything? What may we lose if we go locally to a bank?
Ms. Halsey?
In addition to the support that the local banks give our community that Mr. Arredondo expressed and Ms. Villalpando expressed, I think also I've really noticed how area banks support youth services, and not just in the school but outside of the school, in terms of recreational programs for kids and a number of different places. And so I would be in favor of going out for an RFP and finding out what services local banks have to offer, if they have the abilities to process our monies, and what the trade-offs would be. So.
I too think this is a good idea. I also think this is a policy that would be core board function. You know, it's outside of educating kids. It's what we do with taxpayer money. So I think this generating, while sometimes I worry about things that might generate from us, this doesn't cause me any concern. So it seems like there's a critical mass of trustees that would be in support of an RFP. Are there any trustees who would dissuade or suggest this would be a bad idea? So, Mr. Barton, Ms. Costillo?
I have a question too.
Okay.
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea or not a good idea. You know, we're looking at enhancing our local economy here, and I understand that. But I think what we are, members of this board, looking out for the highest profit for our school district, to serve the needs and the resources of all our students. So it's not a bad or a good, no, but I just, if it's advantageous for us, then we should. But if it's not, you know, I think our community would understand that we're trying to be in a process that will generate us more money than maybe out there. That's all I'm saying, you know, because it is, you know, it's nice to say, well, you know, I got you banks, I got you, you know, the school money here, or whatever. It's nice to say that, and the community can, but there's not a lot of people that can go to the bank and borrow money, because you gotta be at a certain credit level in order to get money anyway. But I just want us to make sure that whatever direction we go, and we look at it objectively and see what is going to be more beneficial for the school district, the advantages versus the disadvantages, and the long haul, not just because it's local.
I'll come back to you. Ms. Hanson?
Well, and I'm just wondering, do we have to go to the formal process of an RFP? Can we have discussion with banks to find out if they're interested and if they can, you know, what they might be able to offer, rather than actually going through that formal process?
That makes me nervous. I mean, isn't that what the RFP's for? If we have a well-structured RFP, isn't that going to generate proposals that we can take or can choose not to take, but yet we would give the opportunity to all of the qualified vendors?
I think we have to define in an RFP what we're wanting, right?
Right.
So have we defined what we're wanting?
We haven't. I mean, I haven't seen it written.
I mean,
Before we went to that length, I wanted to see if this was something that was going to come back to us and have a good chance of success before we task Mr. Barton with that, putting that together. What other information do you need, or what other resources would you need in order to put together an RFP for this?
Okay. The first thing at the bottom of your investment report, you'll see that the Public Funds Investment Act guides everything we do. That's in our board policy, and it's supposed to be reviewed each year by the board at the final investment policy. So a lot of those things would be cleaned up by an RFP, and that would be something where a lawyer is involved, and maybe an investment advisor, to make sure step by step we're in compliance with legal. If we couldn't be, and that's a security issue, can they secure our funds with the right amount of collateral? I won't talk about that much, because they can either do it or they can't, and some people are very skeptical. It's not a partial collateral, it's a full collateral. $1 million, $2 million, they have to put up collateral to that. 20, I mean, it really does up the ante. And so the amount of money that the board would want to invest in an institution outside of our government pools is really important to this. I'll tell you that as far as the business office and the Department of Finance, as we've researched this, there's three major issues. Number one, and we do have a model for this. It's not the absolute of what we mark RFP, but we have a depository, and we keep $2.5 million with Frost Bank, and that relationship's been here with this district for years. So we know what it's like to have money with a bank. The terms might be a little bit different, and we try to approach this with an open mind. But number one, how liquid is it? If we put money into an account, is it locked up for 6 months, a year? How long is that there, and are we allowed to draft money off that account if we needed to? One of the things TextPool does is we're able to get the benefits of a checking account. Not only do we write checks off that, they're electronic checks. There's no fee for those transactions. There's a fee for every transaction we do with our depository. It's a bank, and we're used to that with banks. The government pools have a little bit different set of advantages for the district. So the ability to write checks off that is really a huge deal to us. The security we talked about, but the amount of money at the end, as the board members shape this, if this is a direction they want to go, I think would be a big deal for us, or for the project. If it were all of our money, that would be very concerning. That's not something that we feel like would be secure. And I'll tell you, our offices did look into that as we pursued the bond. And they talked about keeping the bond in a local institution. And the return on that investment, the security of that investment, and the ability to write checks on that investment were not there. And that's why we went to a government pool. I'll tell you and again, the RFP and what an institution might offer us could be something totally different than what exists with our depository. But our interest rate on our depository, where we keep a steady $2.5 million, and we use that to write checks, is 0.11%. The interest rate, and you saw with our bond, the interest that it's earned in just the amount of time, we get a daily amount of interest there from 1.5% to 2.5% has been the range over the last several months. And that's a dramatic difference in revenue to the district. And so, again, investing in our community is wonderful, and the amount of money that we put in, because there is a significant amount of money that the district has, is a big deal. But removing a vast amount of that from TextPool would be detrimental, not just to security and the ability to generate extra revenue off that money, but also to the systems and controls that we have in place. And we do a great job making sure we don't have issues like some of our area districts where they lose money because our systems are in place, and they're, I don't want to say airtight because God bless us, but our people are wonderful. They follow the rules religiously, and our controls are where they need to be. And when you introduce change into that, you create a situation where something negative could happen.
Well, I think you'd have a hand in shaping what that RFP looked like, obviously. So I guess we'll put this for an action item in February, and if there's any other resource you need in the meantime, I guess let us know so we can.
I think you would just direct us to get an RFP for a certain number of parameters, and then we'd have to work on fleshing that out legally, and then come back to the board and make sure we're on the same page and then publish it. But with an open mind, there are some concerns about that one.
Okay, well, I'd like to see a proposal from Mr. Barton and the administration that we can then adopt or modify, and with your feedback. Is February an appropriate timeline?
We'll get to work on it and give you. I'll let you know if it's not on that timeline.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Item 6F, census update from staff.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. So on the dais, we left a one-sheeter. This is provided by the census itself. From the district standpoint, as far as communication, our goal is to really start pushing it out next week and go week by week and start giving our families information on the census. In the fall semester, Dr. Martinez with Texas State gave you an update on the census itself and then gave you an opportunity to ask any questions. Dr. Cunningham and Dr. Valadez, they represent the district on a committee that's with the city, county, and they're going to give you some information that they've received from the committee.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. So just a couple of quick points. We've been meeting since May. Dr. Martinez is in the audience here, and she is one of our co-chairs for the San Marcos Census Counting Committee. We are going to host a kickoff event here at the beginning of February, February 5th. We do ask support from the school board to allow us spaces within our campuses to make contact with our community partners, our parents, our families, to increase the understanding of why it's so important to have themselves counted. A couple of other plans that we are working with Mr. Fernandez is to train our key personnel that have most contact with our parents, so our receptionists, our parent liaisons, our attendance clerks, our registrars are in constant contact with parents and families so that they understand what's the verbiage to use, how do you help parents understand the why of the census, and who to contact if they have any questions about it. So we're planning on a training for those key personnel across our campuses. We also are developing a pledge campaign, so parents would have an opportunity to pledge, I am going to count myself in the census, I'm going to count my family, and so that would be across the district as well, all of our campuses, messaging and posting those messages, the slogans that are being developed by the U.S. Census, so that are also available messaging at each of our campuses, front offices, etc. And then, of course, contacting our business partners and community partners so that they help us message, whether it's as simple as our marquee or having conversations with their staff at meetings to make sure that they are counting their families. So there's just a few things that we're working on within the school district to help the Census Committee spread the word. Dr. Cunningham, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess so. Dr. Valadez and I are the committee chairman of the chairman of the Subcommittee for Education, and what it means for the district is really just counting our kids. There's historically San Marcos is undercounted quite significantly, and just at the bare minimum, if we do what we've historically done as far as undercount, that's hundreds of millions of dollars over the next decade for San Marcos. And what that looks like as a school, I will say, that's my kids running out of Medicaid money at the end of the month for medicine. That's affordable housing dollars, things like that that are kind of have an indirect impact on the school and our ability to meet we're talking about social-emotional and what causes kids not to be at school. It's stuff like that. And literally it could be, I've heard everywhere from $750 million in the next 10 years. It also counts for, now they're doing the new EcoDisc for the new school accountability and funding. We're not sure how exactly it's going to look like, but it really looks like they're going to use this even more targeted for how, so basically they take EcoDisc numbers and they're do 5 different census tracks of where the kids are. Basically they're grading how much poverty you have, and then if I had to guess, that's going to be tied into school funding, specifically in school accountability, and so we need proper data for it. So we've been working, how do we get the message out to the parents? And I think there's enough knowledge in the schools. Like, I know where the Crockett Zone kids are that historically are probably going to be hard to count. So how do we help message that? And we're a trusted source of, hey, this is why you need to do it. Here's how it impacts us. Then we're also working with Texas State folks, and this is really where I think it's more difficult, that if the kid is a Texas State student, they need to be counted in San Marcos. I know when I was a college kid, I just assumed that was going to happen up at my parents' house. Or we have these rent by the rooms. In the eyes of the census, that's one abode. And so they're going to be sent out one census thing to fill out. And if the one roommate gets in and fills it out, they think that's done for that. But there might be 8 kids in there. And so we're working with Texas State to how do we communicate that message as well too. So there's religious subcommittees, there's a bunch of different subcommittees, but it really is a messaging to get the word out of why this is important for political apportionment. It's important for federal dollars, but really as an education system, it's that, do we have proper data for our accountability and our funding, which I suspect state's going to use that. And I said those indirect things, like I have kids that they run out of, you can see it at the end of the month, they run out of funding. And this is, all those dollars from the federal government are not going to go flowing to San Marcos if we don't get the number count. So that's really the importance of it.
Ms. Hanson?
My question is, you know your students and where they're not being counted or were in the past census. Do the other principals know that? And if not, what can we do to get that information to them?
Not to put words in them, I suspect they probably know. I mean, there's inquiry. I mean, it's things like if we got 3 or 4 families doubled up, and who counts for that? It's like a message, everyone living there. So, I've got plenty of families where there's, mom and dad, but then there's extended family that they've been thrown out of their housing for whatever reason. They're living there. It's making sure the message gets out. Okay, yes, the people that own or the people that main renters on the house, they need to be counted, but then also everyone else living there at that time. But then you're also coming up with maybe they're not on the lease. I know I got families that are not on the lease, and they're worried about, well, that's not going to get back to you. We're also combating the federal government is sending out 2 college surveys in April in Texas State just magically got picked as one of the pilot schools. So our college kids are going to have the census to try to, we have to message that, and also 2 other sort of, things that look census-y at the same time. So this really is a messaging thing. And that's where the school really, I think they trust us and we can get the message out. I think we're in a pretty good place. I am more worried about the university, how we get that message out, because I remember myself as a 20-year-old university kid, I don't know if the census was big on my mind. And I did think I was supposed to be counted up in Dallas, so I think that's what we're working as the education subcommittee. That's the Texas State has folks working on this as well too, just like Monica and I have been working at the district level.
Mr. Ardono?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Again, this was an item that I requested during agenda preparation, and I think the census is very much like our students themselves. We know the students who show up on day 1 who more than likely are at risk of dropping out or having academic challenges. They're economically disadvantaged, they're housing insecure, they have challenges at home. And in the exact same way, I can tell you which 3 single-member district areas are going to be the census tracts with the least amount of people counted, and it's going to be Lupe, Margie, and my district, which are the most diverse and the poorest in comparison to the other 4. And so I guess my biggest concern is the resources and the time that staff has available to them to do this on top of everything else that we're asking them to do. Mrs. Valadez is in charge of our dual language programming, our bilingual program, our ESL programs, but yeah, we're also asking her to do this as well. Same thing with Mr. Cunningham at Crockett. And again, my concern is as we ask them to do all of these things, we're asking them to do one more, which is extremely critical to the populations that we serve when it comes to Head Start funding and things like that. And so I appreciate this information tonight. I guess was hoping that we would have a conversation here and possible action in February to provide additional resources on the ISD side or a framework of commitment to make sure that we're not asking administrators and teachers to do even more than they already are, knowing how critical the census is. And so I don't know where this conversation is going to go in response to that, but that was my motivation and intent of putting this on tonight's agenda.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I have a question. So it was my understanding that the public library is going to have stations set up for people to come in and fill out the census.
Yes.
Is that correct? Right. So are we planning to do something similar at each of our campuses? Or if we aren't planning, could we do something where families can come in and fill it out?
Yeah, so that's part of the training for the staff, the ones that are in most contact with the parents. So our parent liaisons and coordinating with them so that each campus has the wherewithal to be able to organize those and have them at their campuses as well.
Terrific.
So if they want to come in and if they want to set up on the computer and answer the questions, they can do so.
That's great. And I apologize for not having the second semester calendar in my memory yet, but is it possible that any of the census time coincides with when we would have in-service days or parent-teacher conference days?
So I believe the next parent-teacher conference day is mid-February, isn't it? February 17th. And really the big push in terms of the U.S. Census comes mid-March. So we're doing on the front end when we can in terms of messaging and making sure our campuses are prepared to do what they can, whether it's before school, after school, et cetera, or on events. So what part of our messaging will happen so that we can provide the information whether it's our coaching staff, et cetera, that they can announce it at our big ticket items or events. So like the STEAM fair, have information at the STEAM fair. So there's several big events that happen over the spring semester on campuses that each event coordinator is able to have the information necessary so that we can post that, and parents also have information at those events.
I think that's great. I appreciate the move that we've made across the district to use more electronic correspondence, and I'm sure we'll do this electronically. I think that this is important enough that sending home paper in backpacks is also warranted, and I also would say that in addition to those times when people are congregating on campus, we every day have parents lined up in carpool lanes before and after school and flyer ticketing them as they're out there, where they're really captive, I think is great.
Yes, we're going to use all platforms, whether it be like text messages, traditional flyers, call outs, English, Spanish. So go to different events like STEAM Fair. We have our health fair in March. So all types of events, not just district events, but community events as well.
Thank you.
One last comment, Mr. McLaughlin. I guess in my head, I envision we have a roster of like every family in the ISD's boundary, and we know that they're in our jurisdiction. Is there any way that we can create a database internally as an ISD, and when a family notifies us that they've completed the census, then we know that Arredondo's family has done it and we don't have to worry about them anymore? I mean, very easily we know how many ISD families we have, not just families in general, but families that have students enrolled in the school district. So at least our commitment could be that we ensure that every ISD family we've at least touched once to say, please complete this, submit it by this date, this is how important it is. Like, we have that. I would
We're
hope
not
we
gonna
have
get
that
on the other
technology
end.
with how much we spend on technology.
Like, we're not gonna get on the other end, like, we don't get a thing, this family's checked it off. I mean, if a parent wanted to self-report, hey, I did the census, but we went back and forth like, hey, could we reward people, incentivize? And we kind of have to stay hands off like that because it'd be like us intervening then. So I don't know if we'd be able to find that information, like all the families did it and then go back to them.
But it could be an internal system, though, correct? I mean, you would know like a spreadsheet or PEMS or whatever that is, and you know how many students there are at an address transportation hasn't. So you would know that that household has 4 ISD kids at it because that's where we pick them up for transportation purposes. So we would hope that we would call Arredondo's family or send a mailer home or whatever that looks like, and hope that they report their family and the 3 kids that are there.
Yeah, I'm confident that we can get information to every single family in the school, so I have no doubt about that.
But we're not gonna know when they complete it, right?
But we could ask them to self-report.
Right, so I think part of it is that the pledge campaign, so that parents pledge that they are going to count themselves. And I know that we've done with the CEP as well, where our parent liaisons really come on board and are like on the phone constantly calling individual parents and to get the 100% completion rate for our CEPs, which is a form as well. This one we wouldn't have any way of really truly knowing one way or the other if they did fill it out, but we could make sure that we at least contact them and say, have a yes or a no, like we did.
I mean, I appreciate that, and I guess, we've historically done the census, and we've, appointed these committees, and we've done the things, and, I mean, we historically and forever and always have been undercounted. And then when we talk about these programs, and it's, well, if we only had more money, and this is our opportunity to get more money. So if we just kind of go through this process and say it's going to happen, and, we went through the motions, and it is what it is, then in 10 years, I don't want us to say, I wish we had more funding for Head Start or Medicare and Medicaid in this town, because historically that's what it's been. And
Yeah,
so
no,
when
no,
we
absolutely.
talk about additional resources needed as elected officials, but yet we don't commit to the census or trying to get as many people counted, I think it's disingenuous to say that we're up here fighting for our constituents when we're not willing to make sure that they're counted. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kickoff event will be key because we are inviting a lot of key personnel out in our communities, people that have a vested interest, for example, Senecor, all of our social service organizations that work a lot with our families that typically aren't going to participate in the census, so they also help us communicate that. So that's happening again at the beginning of February, and the Census Committee is just approving a couple of key items logistically, and then we'll spread that word and make sure that folks get the letter invitation. The other thing, and I was going to mention, and right now it slipped my mind, Being very strategic. So as you mentioned, Mr. Arredondo, being very strategic. We know our families that are homeless, or McKinney-Vento, that are staying with other families, so that we can be very strategic about making sure that the host families understand that they need to be counted along with them on their census. We also have a lot of families that host other families, and they're not considered homeless because they've been living together for a number of years, but the other family isn't on the lease. So making sure that our host families understand, hey, make sure that you count everybody on your lease in this way, or in your house in this way. So we can be very strategic about some of our populations.
Awesome, thank you. Ms. Hanson?
Brought up the homeless.
Dr. Martinez, would you like to come in and so she's asking me to mention that we're also doing workshops for our community members, so that they know how to participate.
You also mentioned homeless, and I'm talking about truly homeless. They're living in their car or whatever. How are we getting to those families? How's any information? I mean, some of them do have like a post office box, or a friend that gets their mail and gives it to them.
So those individuals can also, so we have knowledge of individuals, so we can get them information in terms of they can go to the library that help them call the U.S. Census and say, I need to participate, can you send me a form? And they can help them through that process. So part of it is counting on our community partners to help out in those specific cases. The same thing with our university student population. Like Dr. Cunningham said, some of them have rent by the room, and so you have 8 different folks living in there. And so if that one filled it out for him and the two roommates that they like, but they didn't fill it out for the other 5, then those 5 can actually go and say, request a form because I haven't counted myself and I live at this address, and they can do that. So it's just, again, a matter of messaging. And I would ask if any of you have spheres of influence for the university staff, that y'all make sure that y'all let them know how important it is that we need their backing in terms of contacting their undergraduate students, especially, that typically are the ones that are in the rent by the room apartments, to make sure that they count themselves here and not back home where they might have lived with their parents.
My name is Gloria Martinez. I came earlier in September. This parts of San Marcos has been identified as really hard to count. I mean, really, you have the hard count, but the real hard count, they're not even going to work on the using phones or the online. They're going to send the form directly to certain households that are the real hard count. So starting April 1st, or probably at the end of March, families are automatically going to get some of the form, the actual form, to fill out. Not everybody's going to get that form, but the real hard to count will get that form. So some people might get confused because other people are they're going to say, well, wait a minute, I didn't get a form. You got a form and I didn't get a form. It's really those families that are the geographical areas that are really hard to count, that are automatically going to get a form. So just to make that clear. And we're all going to offer some workshops to clarify that. But we really appreciate your cooperation and working with us. We're working really hard in the San Marcos Complete Count Committee and partnering with different community organizations.
Thanks for your input. Mr. Arredondo, I sense that you have some dissatisfaction with the level of activity from the board on this item. I mean, I'm open, at least as far as the agenda is concerned, that if you have a concrete idea of a way we can do more than we're already doing, either resource-wise or otherwise, but I don't just want to do something for the sake of doing it if it's not going to be effective. If we have people self-report, we're going to get like a 60% return rate that's going to give us no usable data. If we hire some people to hire them, but we don't task them with something that works in conjunction with what's already happening, I feel like it's just good money after bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I've kind of shared my concerns, and I guess the reason why I brought this forward to the board, and I appreciate my colleagues who have weighed in on this conversation, but if there's not critical mass or a sense of urgency from everyone, then, I mean, we've had the conversations, and I thank the staff who are adding this on top of what they're already doing.
Okay. Well, I think people share urgency. I just don't know the solution that we're avoiding.
With urgency from some, but.
Okay. Ms. Villapando.
I would like to see, because Miguel and I have Mr. Arredondo and I have the same problem. Not that it's a problem for us, but it's a problem for the census because our districts go into Guadalupe and Caldwell County, and our areas are those that are extremely poor. So can we maybe get or have people contact us? So can we do something for those students that are identified in the school that are in those areas? It's kind of tricky because it's part of our district, and both of us are running for re-election right at the time of the census, and I see it as a problem that people might think we're out there just trying to get their vote, but I'm really interested in getting them counted so that the school can benefit from it. So I don't know. It's a predicament, and I don't know what the answer is. If Mr. Arredondo has any other.
So, Mr. McLaughlin, in response to your question of a concrete idea, there are actual online toolkits that say, like, you do these things. So if that needs to come to the board in February and say that we commit to doing these things as an ISD, I mean, in the exact same way that, like, attendance is an issue, I mean, attendance is an issue in other school districts, and I'm sure some have figured it out. So in regards to the census, there are census toolkits. I mean, if I have to agendize, let's vote to enact this toolkit of best practices that are statistically proven, then I can do that. But in other instances where trustees have brought actual tangible, votable, actionable items, it's been seen as overstepping our bounds or going beyond the purview of an individual trustee. So that's why by Socratic method it was discuss this as a legislative body versus let's do X, Y, and Z, and then people be combative about what X, Y, and Z is.
Well, I just don't. Okay, I appreciate that. If you've got a agenda proposal for February, I mean, I'm open to it. It's just we had a discussion. Everybody was like, "Yay, census! What can we do? Let's do everything we can do." If you have that has not satisfied your concerns, then put it on as an action item and we can discuss it. I mean, you started that process with the community banking, and now we're very close to having an RFP we can adopt. So I don't think, I mean, this is something that elected bodies do, and it's not core administrative, it's not education per se, it impacts education, but it's part of our responsibility. So I didn't hear anybody closed off to an idea of doing more. They're just telling you, doing everything we know to do, you know, and unless.
Well, they didn't tell you everything that we're doing. They didn't tell you the principals or have a plan with the, like, they didn't tell everything that we're doing.
Right.
But we shouldn't have to hand walk y'all through everything we're doing. But.
Mr. Cunningham, did you and the members of the census go to a training recently?
A few of us did, yes.
Will you explain the contingent of other ISDs who were there at that training in comparison to San Marcos CISD?
There are some people from Austin ISD. I don't remember another ISD there at all, actually, to tell you the truth.
How involved
Maybe a
was
charter
Austin
school.
ISD in that training?
It sounds like kind of well, obviously they're way bigger, so they had some parent liaison types that were getting involved, but I just assumed there was more there. It was in Austin, and they probably have it was at the United Way, and so there's probably already connection between them. I took it as maybe 5 or 6 people there from Austin ISD, so, and I was there and just bringing back to the committee what I learned from it, so.
80,000 students and 6,000 employees.
Yeah.
So did you hear anything that they were doing differently or in comparison to us where we're
No, it
similar?
was more just we getting our information from the United Way. I would say my biggest takeaway from it was for the hard to count population, face-to-face with someone they trust is the best way to get it. So I guess going back to if we had the people submit, they filled it out, that'd be the people that already filled it out anyways. It would be the people who we wouldn't reach, who wouldn't even know to do that. And the best way to get them, so speaking to like Redwood and stuff, we've got there's religious groups out there, like churches that are meeting with people. We're talking about maybe doing something down by Rio Vista where the way it works is if you can get like a trusted grandparent, this is why we need to do it. with all the noise that's out there, we've already started to see Facebook noise and stuff trying to undercount the population, because there's definitely a political football, or there's political will to undercount certain places. And so there's all sorts of subterfuge going on with that we're trying to combat. But if you can get someone that they trust, this is why you need to do it. The citizenship question is not on the census. That's probably the thing we get asked the most. People don't know if it is or if it isn't. It's anonymous. But there's people have fear of it. And like I said, I've already started talking to parents. Okay, you need to fill it out. I know you're not on the lease, but this is not going to hurt you. It's not going to get you in trouble with it. It's overcoming that fear, and the best way to do that is someone they trust. And so that's why religious organizations are getting involved, because the preachers are going to start in San Marcos are going to start talking about, hey, this is why we need to do it. Here's why it's important. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Thank you.
Ms. Halsey?
Well, I would say that perhaps this is in the letter that you referred to that's going to be coming, but I would certainly welcome more information from the committee that says here are 16 different ways you can get more involved, sharing it on social media, here are the links, if you need people to canvass in neighborhoods, people to do block walking, I think that there's probably a lot of us that are absolutely willing to jump in and help. We just need to be told when and where. So.
And that is part of the kickoff event. Part of it is to make sure that folks know what is it that I can do from my sphere of influence. And then I know that Andrew, Mr. Fernandez wanted to mention another idea that we're floating around, that it would require some support from the board. So he was mentioning in terms of staff being able to go out and canvass these hard-to-count locations. So our Caldwell, our Guadalupe folks, to be able to pay our staff to be able to canvass, maybe on weekends, make sure they're knocking on doors and saying, hey, this is important. And of course, we would again provide the talking points. This is how you describe it, so that everybody has a uniform way of describing it, and we're not inflating or presenting misconceptions. So that is an idea that we've discussed as well. Of course, that would require some additional money to do extra duty pay for these folks that we would train so that they could go out and do that.
Ms. Costilla?
Well, similar, I was going to mention almost like similar to a grassroots campaign, where you can even hopefully maybe identify some captains from the neighborhoods, from a neighborhood that know the area. When you're talking about trust, yeah, and the issue that's going to be that has always been there is the areas where you have a lot of underrepresented populations there that are not trusting. And so that's going to be the issue, and that's where you need those people, those captains in those neighborhoods, where they can know, oh, I know them, and you can go and knock on their door and get that information, and they're going to trust you, and they're going to give you that information. But that's a lot of captains that you have to identify in those areas. I mean, that's what a grassroots campaign is. You appoint people that know the people in your area, and you promote that person that you're wanting, and because they trust you already. So that's hard work, but staff would be an option, but I think captains in the neighborhoods will be another good option, that they can take 1 or 2 or 3 streets.
Yes, absolutely. Our informal leaders are key. So in terms of, we're the education committee, but there are also other committees subcommittees as part of the committee. And so there is a plan in terms of working alongside our ones that are focused on the business part, the ones that are focused on faith-based organizations, et cetera, social services, media. So there are other subcommittees that are also working their area. So it's not just us. So just know that there's others organized within the subcommittee, and then of course again on the kickoff we'll all be there, and we'll get that letter out to you guys so that y'all are present as well and hear the information.
Okay, Ms. Cantu?
I would not be opposed to investing some money, as much as we stand to gain from the count. If we needed to pay people from that, where you gather some volunteers and then see if people are willing to work specific little areas of San Marcos and specifically Guadalupe and Caldwell County. I mean, I've been involved in the recruitment in those areas, and it's a tough area to go door to door, but I think that those are some of the people that won't report, and I have no problem investing a little bit of money on that, because it's a short period of time. It's just for this one thing, and we stand to gain so much from it.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you. Takes us to item 7A, approval of minutes of regularly scheduled board meeting, December 16, and special called meeting on January 13th.
I move that we approve both,
Second.
minutes for both meetings.
I'll second.
Motion by Hanson, second by Cantu. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Oh, it's consent. Yep.
Nope.
All right. Item 8A, consider approval of budget amendments. This is page 39 of the board book. Mr. Barton.
Sir, as we discussed at agenda prep, the school district has worked with a company, Professional Service, to conduct property value studies that has returned revenue to the school district this year from TEA, over $600,000. The company gets a percentage of that, and so that is, we're asking to pay them out of the money that they've brought into the district this year.
Did we approve this at the time we authorized the hire? I mean, we approved this contract, presumably, that we've seen this before?
No, sir, it's a professional service,
Okay.
so it doesn't go through the traditional procurement.
So it was contracted directly by administration? Okay.
Yes, sir.
But the contract requires we pay 10% of whatever they bring in, am I understanding that?
7.5.
So, and that's the amount you're seeking?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Ms.
I move
Villapando?
that- I move that we approve the budget amendment.
Okay,
I'll second.
I heard, Ms. Cantu, so, motion by Villapando, second by Cantu, all in favor? 7-0. Item 8B, consider approval of stipends for 2021 school year.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Cardona. I'm Marcy Baez, Assistant Superintendent of HR. Please find in your board book the recommended stipend portion of the annual compensation plan for the district. The worksheet is complete with name, number, stipends, and the dollar amount, page 44. We are respectfully proposing stipends in the amount of 1.4, which is a little over 11% cost savings from this current year's projected amount of 1.6.
Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you so much, President McLaughlin. My question for the administration is why are stipends not approved when the board is tasked with approving salary and benefits for employees as well? I would assume it's considered a compensation package. So if I was a professional teacher with a master's degree and a coach, then that would obviously equate to a compensation package that would be offered to me. So when we talk about percentage increases and salary and benefits, why is that not all approved at one time?
So there are different portions of the compensation package, and so this is just a part of it that we're trying to get a head start on, and move with transparency on what we need and what's required.
As an individual trustee, I think just holistically for me, when I'm talking about what I'm going to pay a classroom teacher and what additional stipends they might receive for a master's degree, doctorate, or additional duties served in employment. As we talk about the budget and the looming budget deficit, I would just assume that we would take all of those items up at once, or at least that would be my individual preference, because we're committing a pretty large sum of money here on the front end of a tight budget cycle, and that is concerning to me.
Ms. Hanson?
Maybe I'm confused, but under athletics, I don't see a projected number or cost on page 44.
Yeah, the total, I think she's talking about here.
I have a fee down at the bottom, but
Around
not
the side.
for
Not
individual.
individual.
Oh, individual.
Like in hard to staff positions. Was that not supposed to be there, or?
So detailed information, we have that detailed information, we just did it by group.
Okay, so all of these get the same stipend? No?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so, so that's what.
We did see that last year. I remember when we approved
We
the
can get that
stipend,
to
we
you.
Had
saw
the stipend, yeah.
We saw
The
the
item by
specific-
item.
Specific for each position.
We can get that to you.
Yeah, I'm a bit leery to, could be half of that could be going to one position. I know it's not, but as approving it. I don't like the unknown, I guess.
Okay.
Could
We
we
can-
table this and look at it in a future meeting with more specifics on it?
Would that put you in a bind, Ms. Spies, if we came back
No,
in February?
we can do that.
You think you can provide that information?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll entertain a table.
I'll make a motion to table for the February meeting.
Motion to table by Cantu.
I'll second.
Second by Arredondo.
And as a discussion, now that we have a motion in a second, again, just because we're talking about compensation and stipends, as an individual trustee, I would like to look at that holistically. Again, we're committing, with this vote, had it been voted on, out of our budget, we were committing an estimated 1.46 million in salary and benefits conversation. So again, if we can look at that total cost to do that, obviously we have a small pool of money to commit, even though it's, I think, over 60% of our budget for salary and benefits. So I'd like to approve all of that at one time, or at least know what money we have to spend or what money we don't have to spend to approve that. So
You want that from now until forever, because some of y'all had asked for this early, now you're asking it for all at the same time. So I just need to advise the staff how you want us to do it. If you want it all at one time, that's fine, but you'd asked for this early.
I asked for stipends early?
Yes.
Stipends only early.
Well, you've asked.
Salary and benefits early in the
Correct.
process.
You've asked
so
to
we
see
could
earlier.
commit funds. Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate seeing this earlier, but not piecemeal. I mean, I wanted us to commit salary and benefit increases early on so that HR could make those commitments to staff when it came to hiring. But saying that we've approved stipends does not create a hiring schedule for a future teacher or an administrator. So I guess that was where, I apologize for that miscommunication for myself. But again, it was, I guess, solidifying compensation packages as early as possible. So that would include stipends, benefits, yearly salary, and all of the above, so that Ms. Baez and HR could go out and hire those extremely qualified employees.
I'm okay individually taking them separate. We have to do them both. I'm also okay if salaries and benefits, if you would be ready for teacher pay scale in February, that's a bit earlier than we traditionally done it. I'm okay taking that then too. But I think for the moment, tabling it to February makes a lot of sense. We all agree to that, I think. So, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor on tabling the item February 7? Okay.
So proposal for early notification, sorry. Yeah,
You can carry forward. I'm sorry. Item 8C, consider approval of an early retirement resignation incentive for professional, paraprofessional, auxiliary employees. Ms. Baez?
so the board approved an incentive last year and the year before. And this is designed to incentivize folks to let us know if they're retiring or resigning early. So that we can do a better job of staffing, getting a number of that while incentivizing and honoring their service to our district.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Is this available to any employee who opts into the program?
So there are requirements. They've had to have worked with us for 5 years. There's, they can take, there are requirements.
So if I'm a food service employee who's eligible for the
oh,
program,
yes.
making $18,000 a year, or I'm a director making $100,000 a year, I would be eligible for that percentage incentive to notify HR that I was resigning or retiring.
Yes, so the minimum is 1,000, but it's 4% of that employee's base salary, up to $3,000 per employee.
Okay. As an individual trustee, I would entertain a cap on employees eligible for that benefit. Obviously, if you're making $80, $90, $100,000 a year, I think you've had a pretty healthy salary thus far, and a $3,000 bonus to acknowledge that you're leaving early. I'm a little bit hard pressed to vote in favor of that, but that's just me individually. So I don't know if there's support from my colleagues to put a cap on the ceiling of who's eligible for that, but I would support that.
Ms. Halsey?
Can you please remind me of how many people took advantage of this program last year? And then when would the 30-day time period start if this is approved tonight?
So last year, there were 16 employees that took advantage of it and were approved. And the year before that, it was 17 employees. It would start March 1st. We'd get the information out as soon
Just
as.
as a clarifying statement, I guess it would be employees making over X amount of dollars would not be eligible for the incentive, not a percentage, because obviously it caps at 3,000. That's the ceiling that you would receive. But again, if you're making $90,000 a year, I'm hard pressed individually to throw you a $3,000 check because you let us know that you're retiring. But again, that's just me.
Other questions before we try to cobble a motion?
Originally, this was brought about because we wanted to know about the teaching positions and the teaching assistant positions. So I've always looked at this as a teaching incentive, counselor incentive, because you need to start looking ahead of time in advertising. So I did not realize that we had also, the professional would include your administrators. So the way it's worded here, it includes administrators.
Auxiliary, all staff.
Is that how it worked in the past 2 years?
Yes,
sir. Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I move that the board approve the early resignation retirement incentive for professional, paraprofessional, and auxiliary employees as presented.
A second.
We got a motion by Halsey, second by Hanson. Discussion. I'm just, Ms. Baez, I've been against this every time, even before you, Mr. Watson, brought this. I just don't think it's a wise idea. I think, when people tell me they want to resign at my office, I prefer they just go then, because they just mail it in for the next whatever the length of time is. And I don't think our teachers would do that, but generally, I don't understand the upside. We don't make hires in March. Well, at least I don't usually see them. And the only thing I've ever heard about this is people that take advantage of it and then regret it in April or May. And they're like, I took the money and now I want to stay and I've got to reapply for my job and whatever. So anyway, I just didn't want you to take it personally when I vote against it. But we've got a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 5-2 carries. Arredondo and McLaughlin. Someday, it's like the school lunch not increasing someday. I might see the other side of that vote. Item 8D, consider an order calling, we're pulling this item on request of staff, and it's going to come back to us at agenda prep because we do not have all of the requisite approvals and information we need, specifically with regard to Caldwell County. So that takes us to 8E, consider and possible action on the contract with Bartlett Cock Commercial Construction LLC for SMCISD Days of Isle Elementary School renovation and addition project. Mr. Barton.
On the colored paper that you had provided to you is the contract amount for your approval this evening.
Does this amount vary, and if so, by how much from what was submitted in the initial bid?
It is less.
By how much?
Tough to answer because alternates were involved. There were 3, and with architecture, we understood one was unnecessary. In working with the construction company, we found ways to blend some landscaping, which was one of the alternates, so we didn't need an alternate for that. They're just going to blend it on in. And so I don't have the original bid amount, but it was, I want to say, $600,000 more. With alternates, it was considerably more. 14.4 was the original bid amount.
Okay. Mr. Arredondo?
Make a motion that we approve the final contract and authorize the superintendent to execute contract with Bartlett Cock Construction as presented by staff.
I second.
Any further discussion? Nope. Seeing none, all in favor? 6. I'm opposed. 661 carries. All right, that takes us down to a closed session. promise will be brief. We'll adjourn at this time to close session as authorized by section 551.072, 551.075 of the Texas Government Code to discuss relocation of central office. We promised it'd be short. We are back. I do not believe that there's any motion coming out, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion by Hanson, second by Cantu. All in favor? 7-0. That's it.